Hey everyone, welcome back to Corbin AI, where I'm showing you how to start leveraging artificial intelligence in your personal or your business life. Now, you clicked on today's video because you essentially want to know two major things. The first thing you want to know is the thought process behind building an automation, and the second thing you want to know is how do I apply that so I can build any type of automation I want for my business, and you can reuse this framework and this process and essentially really start building out complex flows by understanding these fundamental blocks. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in here. Essentially, the first thing I want to do in this video is going to be a little bit more of showcasing potential of the automation platform, a little bit more of, drawn on a whiteboard. And then the second half of this video, I'm going to dive in and build out an example flow. So the context of the flow that I'm going to be building out using this process live is going to be a flow. Essentially, when we receive an email, we're going to use GBT analysis to send it between different paths depending on what we want on the data we received that email. So that'll make more sense later in the tutorial. Let's go ahead and start off though by fundamentally understanding what an automation is, how to approach when you want to build out automation, what to understand when building automation. This is going to help you regardless of your skill level. So whether you're a starter or an expert when it comes to Zapier and just automation platforms in general, this kind of thought process is going to allow you to build out more complex flows and flows that you want to start integrating in your business, because you're going to better understand intuitively the capabilities of what you need to understand to build out these flows. So enough of me talking there. Let's go ahead and jump into the major thing that we need to understand essentially when building out flows is that's going to be our toolkit. So what I mean by toolkit is beyond the apps that essentially integrate natively into Zapier. Zapier has apps that are essentially built within Zapier's backend. So for example, filters by Zapier. Let me see if I can pull up the entire list here real quick. Okay, so I got the entire list here. Essentially, these are apps that obviously are built by Zapier and aren't just like, Facebook or Google Ads. Like, these are actually Zapier apps. And the reason I start off this tutorial like this is because this is your toolkit. So this is essentially your wrench. This is your Phillips screwdriver. This is what essentially gives you the breadth of understanding what you're able to do within the platform past the functions of the apps that you plan on integrating. So what do I mean by that? A couple things. First thing is that, for example, do you understand what a filter is? In this context, a filter can be used in a lot of different situations. So to give one recently that we've integrated in our backend is we've added more fraud analysis. So essentially, anytime we incur a transaction, we go through a automation process that essentially uses a filter block, and based off stuff we've already set up, we have tags set up with our orders where essentially if it's been identified as a filter, or it's been identified within that filter to essentially be fraud, then we'll continue the flow in a different route, different paths in an email, so on and so forth down that process. So filters are fundamental when trying to use more if-else statements, right? So if you're familiar with coding, you know what if-else is. So if these variables are true, we're going to do this. If these are not true, we won't do this. So this is very, very useful. Formatting, I'm sure you're familiar with this. If you're familiar with this channel, this is what essentially allows us, and this is very important in the context of specifically ChatGPT and other contexts as well, but this allows you to take outputs and when you receive data to essentially, in the name, format it, whether you want to separate maybe a one big data block into multiple different data points, whether you want to essentially remove special characters within a add data output. That's fundamental to know. Schedule, if you do a lot of stuff when it comes to, every Sunday I need to do reports, social media posting every Monday or every Tuesday I want to post something. That's important. Delay, this is what's going to give you the ability to essentially, put delays on your flow. So there's two use cases for this. First use case is, mimicking human responses in the context of AI. Second use case for this is sometimes in a flow, there's going to be a process that might be happening outside. So maybe you have two Zapier flows occurring at the same time, and one of the Zapier flows requires data from this Zapier flow, but essentially the data takes a couple seconds to get received. Therefore, we need to put a delay block of 2 minutes in order to that data gets received. So that might sound really complex, but as you start understanding more of this, you'll start realizing, how do I use a data or a delay block and why that delay block is so fundamental. The next one is Code by Zapier. So look at Code by Zapier as your universal tool that essentially, in theory, Code by Zapier could do all of these, but these are just packaged nicer. So Code by Zapier is that kind of extendo where essentially, if there's a certain function that you're trying to do that these don't suffice, you just can code it. So that's that context. Looping, this is a pretty complex one, but pretty powerful one, especially in the context of spreadsheets, especially in the context of maybe instead of setting up 10 different zaps to digest some data, we can set up one zap and then set up a looping function. So, essentially repeat a certain amount of data manipulation, 10 times, 5 times, so on and so forth. And the list kind of continues here. I don't want to bore y'all by going through all this, but the point is essentially is this is the first thing you really need to understand when it comes to, can I build out any type of automation I want? Because what this does is this gives you a base level of essentially your understanding the capabilities that you have when it comes to building out automation. So for example, RSS feed, podcast, storage. This is a huge one. If you don't know what storage is, I can store a data point from one Zapier flow and I can call upon that data point in another Zapier flow. So a lot of this stuff, you can check out my other videos here, especially in the Zapier for AI 5000, which will be at the end of this video. You can kind of get more intuitively understanding these, but this is the first step, is understanding your toolbox. So once you understand your toolbox, so we can go kind of go like one here, and I'm gonna go ahead and exit this out here. Once you understand your toolbox, now the next step is, okay, so I know what I can do outside of just the underlying software. Now the next step is, understanding, obviously before, the step of what do I want to automate. Now the next step is understanding what software I plan or have intentions of trying to automate. So once you understand the software you try to automate, the way to do that, and due to the fact that Zapier integrates with so many softwares, this should be pretty easy here. Let's say for our example, we plan on integrating today, which is going to be Gmail. Okay, so it integrates. We plan on integrating AI, OpenAI. So using, Zapier apps, going to the domain, zapier.com/apps, you can see there's all of my software integrate. OpenAI, and then essentially, maybe we'll throw Google Drive in there just to show some use case when it comes to grabbing files. So Google Drive, perfect. Another thing that Zapier does is it has a nice little, organization of the type of apps. Now, with that all being said, you can integrate apps outside of Zapier. That won't be done in today's tutorial, but we do go over that with webhooks and understanding API requests. For today's tutorial, though, we are just going to show you how to build out any automation, which can still be applied to API requests, but in the context of essentially natively integrated apps. So now that we understand, we have a toolbox, we want to understand, okay, what software do we want as automation flow? So in my specific context, we want to basically analyze an email that's coming in, and we want to send it down 2 different paths depending on the post analysis that we provide. So I understand essentially I'm going to be using Gmail today. I'm going to be using AI today, and then maybe we'll throw in a Google Drive there so we can just kind of show some file usage and stuff of this context. So now that I understand the software I'm going to use in my flow, I understand the toolbox, I understand the software. The next step here is just, let's build out the flow. So let's go ahead and build out this flow. So it's really that simple. So, maybe you want to go and kind of refer to the bucket method here. And I don't want to feel like I'm beating a dead horse here by keep bringing this up. But, for new viewers of this channel that might not know what the bucket method is, I'm going to go ahead and just explain that real quick. So then you can intuitively really start applying automation within your business or other businesses or clients' businesses for that context. And, so the bucket method, which maybe I should trademark by now. Essentially, the bucket method allows you to understand what you should automate. So you have your business here, or you have your, let's say, biz operations. And then essentially, we'll go ahead and just put it all in the cloud. And then you got 2 buckets. So we got the bucket that essentially is automation. Now this can be automation in general context, and this can be automation with AI in it, and then we got manual work. So write that out. And essentially the idea here is this. We take our operations, so we take the hour, 2, 3, 4, 5, however long it takes you to do, write it out, put it in a Google Doc, whatever it is, every single thing associated with your business. When I say everything, I mean everything. The manual text you're sending out, the manual email, the onboarding process, the, actually serving the client process, building out the PDFs maybe for a lead, everything entailed with your business. And once you've written that out in a Google Doc, on a whiteboard, whatever that may be, start analyzing it and saying, what can I automate and what can I not automate? Now, a lot of this, you might have not enough discretion to understand, can I truly automate this? What I would say in the beginning is that if the entire process is either done through software, just lean on the side that I could probably automate this. Now, for manual tasks, this might be certain stuff you can't automate, or you need more discretion over, and I give examples of financial tasks. I give examples of, maybe an employee, analysis of their productivity. There's certain levels of, input that you could do with AI or you can't do with AI because of lack of the ability to access the software that has to be manual. But with that being said, the bucket process, we're filling up our bucket here, filling up our bucket here. Maybe at the end of it, you're like, it's 50-50. So you realize that 50% of tasks that you do on a day-to-day basis is truly, you have to have some input into it. And that's just how it is in the context of how you operate your business. I got to bake the cookies. Unless you get a robot, right? But I got to put the cookies. If I'm a bakery, I got to put the cookies in the oven. I can't automate that. But the stuff over here, accounting and stuff of this in nature, maybe spreadsheet data, handling, lead information, stuff over here can be automated. So now we got our bucket. Now we understand what we need to automate. Let's go ahead and jump over to Zapier, and using everything I just described here, let's go ahead and build out this flow with the context that essentially I'm maybe not too familiar with automation, or I'm approaching this with not really understanding the capabilities of the softwares that I want to automate. So as you remember here, we wanted to do Gmail, we wanted to do OpenAI, and we're going to throw in Google Drive there just as a nice little sweetener so we can really just see some cool stuff. And essentially, and this is really bad handwriting, I should probably be a doctor with this cursive, but let's go ahead and jump in here. And essentially the first step is this. Let's type in the app. So we're going to type in Gmail here, and you could do this in the back end of Zapier as well. And we can scroll down here, and essentially, as you see here, these are all the actions that natively integrate with Gmail. So we can kind of look it over like this. So knowing our specific use case here, I can kind of search through it as you've already probably done through your whiteboard or your Google Doc. Okay, well, I know what is going to be the trigger event. What is going to be the event that essentially incurs everything else past that? And the trigger event for me was going to be a new email. So I know that's new email. You have new labeled email, new email matching search, stuff of this nature. But we know that, okay, so starting off here, Gmail can handle this. And then if you come down here, there's a ton of different stuff that Gmail can handle here. But first step is understanding, can it do it or can it not do it? And going from there. So we understand it can do it for Gmail. And then, go to OpenAI. Okay, well, what do we want to do for OpenAI? We want to basically set up a prompt. Actually, in this context, we're using ChatGPT. So let me actually type this in correct here. So what do we want to do with ChatGPT? Okay, we want to send a conversation because we want to basically take data there and let ChatGPT analyze it. Can it do it? It can do it. Okay, perfect. And then maybe in the context of Google Drive, we want to reply with an email that has a specific file attached to it. So can I find a file? So I can, there's a new file folder. I don't want that. So maybe it's an action. Okay, let me go into here. And I kind of look through here, and essentially I'm basically looking, okay, so I can find the file. If I can find the file, that means that I get a direct link to the file, which means that I can utilize the data within that file in the automation. So that's the kind of way that you want to think about it. All you got to really know is that probably the most important part of your automation when you're building it out is understanding what your trigger is, as none of the stuff post trigger will happen, or will even, go through the process unless that trigger happens. So I think out of everything, that requires probably the most intuitive thinking of like, okay, whatever I'm trying to accomplish here, what would be the best case first step here? So there may be some context here where essentially maybe like 20% of it, you need manual input, but at some point in that work process that you're inputting, there is some point within that work process that you can be like, okay, wait, no, let's set up when we're 20% in, we've done this much work. Now let's set up the trigger where when this incurs, then it handles the rest, right? It maybe not be able to do it from 0 to 100%, but maybe 20%, and then the 80% is automated, if that makes sense. So knowing this, let's go ahead and jump over to our Zapier account here. All these and a ton more are from our previous tutorials here. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a new Zapier, and we're just gonna go ahead and just call it any Zap, and go from here. Now, Zapier does have this feature where essentially they use AI to give you suggestions, but honestly, it's not that effective, especially if you don't know what you're doing, or it's just not that effective because of the fact that it can lead you in the wrong direction. It's almost like, when you're going through YouTube and sometimes you go down a rabbit hole and you're just like, how did I end up here? You can do that with this. Unless you know how to proctor it correctly, you know exactly the words to use in this, I advise against using this for now. As you know, it's beta. Might get better in the future, but for now, it's not going to be effective, and it could lead you in the wrong direction. For now, though, we're going to set up a trigger here. So as we know, we are using Gmail for today's trigger. We already looked, we did research, we understand that Gmail can handle new emails. So we're going to go ahead and do new email, or we could do new email matching search. So it's going to fine tune it a little bit more, which might be better in your use case. So I'm going to go ahead and do my courses account here, and I'm going to send a test email here and then we can further the automation. Okay, so I went ahead and sent a fake email here. So a lot of times when you have lead information or inquiry information, there'll be some type of fixed text that you found within that email. So typically one example of this could be new customer message. Also, there are ways to do it where you can analyze with ChatGPT, but we won't be doing that in this tutorial. But for now, we know our fixed text when we get a lead for a specific inquiry is new customer message. We'll use that in our Zapier flow. But on top of that, as you see here, we got a fake email here. So we got, hey, I hope this email finds you well. My name is John Doe. I reside in 123 Elm Street. I'm reaching out to inquire about lawn mowing services. My lawn is approximately 1,000 square feet, and it goes on, provides a ton of information. So maybe typically your information comes with a lead form. That's a like Google form or some type of form you fill on a website. However your information comes in, we're going to be able to analyze it regardless and still build out a flow of this nature. So let's go ahead and jump back over to Zapier here. We're going to hit continue here, and let's say the search string is new customer message. And then more specifically, so we can get very specific here, we're going to say inbox because it comes into our inbox. So in inbox, and then our subject line is going to be, basically looking for any subject line that has new customer message. We're going to continue here, and then we're going to hit test this trigger. So testing triggers essentially is going to look for data that associates with that. So sometimes when you build out flows, you're going to have to send fake data in order to play with it and essentially build out your flow correctly. So keep that in mind. As you see here, we got our fake data here for that specific email that we just created here. So we're going to say continue with selected record. The next thing we're going to do here is a ChatGPT block. So you would do whatever's next in your context. So think of it intuitively. Okay, so if I was going to do this manually, I would typically open up this email, and then I would essentially, based off me reading the email, I would understand what direction it should go. So for today's example, we're going to basically base the path of where this should go based off the square footage of the lawn that should be mowed. So if it's sub 1,000, we're going to go down a different path because we know that essentially that customer is going to pay less because they have less lawn to mow. If it's above 1,000, we're going to essentially go down a different path because we know that customer maybe we have more likelihood to sell or upsell services due to them having a bigger property. So knowing that, we're going to use a ChatGPT block here. You would use whatever in your context be the next step here. So maybe in your context, you don't even need to analyze it and you just want to send a template right away. You would essentially, set up a Gmail here, maybe add a delay block so it's not instant, and go through that route. So think of it of how I would approach it manually and then trying to translate that into automation. So in this context, we're going to go through the translation of me actually reading the email, but we're going to have ChatGPT read the email and then analyze it for me, so I don't have to go and read the email myself. So maybe you can even set up the context here where essentially it reads the email and it gives me a warning, not even a warning, but like a notification like, hey, it seems like a really, really engaged lead. You should probably check out this email, or not, depending on how you want to approach it. So for this video though, we're going to approach in the context of, the filter method. So we're going to go ahead and do GPT-4 here. GPT-4 allows for more comprehension. You could use 3.5. It requires more proctoring. But for this, we're going to say based off this lead email we received for our lawn mowing company. This is going to be our context block. So we're going to say context. And we're going to do company here. Oh, shiza. We're going to do company here. We're going to say lead email. So essentially, because we have identified the variable point of lead email here, now we can reference it here. So we're going to say lead email, subject, body. In this context, we want to give as much information as possible to ChatGPT so it can understand essentially what it's analyzing, right? So we're going to do parentheses here to make the data stay within the realm of the ChatGPT block here. We're going to put in our subject line here, and then we're going to put in our body plain. This gives essentially all the information that's found within that email, which is nice. It even gives a footer. And we're going to go ahead and say generate the following outputs. Do semicolon. And essentially, based on your contextual business, you would know what data is important to you, or typically what's important to you. So for us, as you saw here on this new customer message, let me drag this over here. We're going to say square feet. Just copy this, square feet of property. And another thing to realize is when I outline it like this, you're going to do square feet property and put the next variable point, it's going to essentially assume that's how I want the structure of the output to be as well, which isn't bad. But if you want a different structure output, then basically the way you provide what data you're requesting should be, structured differently. So we're going to say square feet property, phone, we'll say address, address, semicolon, and, you know, basically anything that you would really care about. So let's just say, and, you know, one summarization, one sentence summarization of this lead. One sentence, one sentence summarization of this lead. So essentially what's occurring here is this. Manually, I mean, it would have been a little bit tough too, because you would have had to, like, you know, maybe copy over the phone number, copy over the address, but manually, if you think about it, when you read that email, you would have already been in your brain basically making a one sentence summarization, two sentence summarization lead. Okay, based off my past experience, based off this, okay, I would probably describe this lead as XYZ. Let's let ChatGPT do that. So then we're going to do, let's see if there's anything else we need to do. I'm going to go ahead and just get the output here. So make sure you use a memory key, random 32 character string. This allows for consistent outputs, especially when scaling and dealing with a lot of data. So we're going to test action here, and let's see if we need to proctor this a little bit further. One thing I want to point out as well, as you'll notice, this is the, you know, basically everything that is being internalized by ChatGPT is right here, this data right here. And as you see here, we got our output. So it's going to be the content in this context. It says square feet 1,000, phone number, Elm Street. And you might be saying, well, this phone number is not correct, but that's the one we provided up here, if you remember. So we already provided like a non-working phone number. And then essentially one sentence summarization of the lead is John Doe is interested in our lawn mowing services along with potential additional services such as fertilizing, aeration, and weeding for 1,000 square feet property, and is looking for information or availability and pricing and the best way to proceed. Okay, so we got all this information, and let's go ahead and show you a specific use case for that toolbox we had earlier. So the next thing you might be asking yourself is, great, I got all this information, but when you push it towards further blocks, it's one big data point, which isn't nice. So let's use a formatter block here. And we're going to use a formatter block because essentially we want to take this text. So the event is, do we want to manipulate time? Do we want to manipulate numbers? Do we want to manipulate text or utilities? We want to manipulate text. And that's going to be the often used case when you're dealing with AI because all outputs are text. And we're going to go ahead and just say split. And splitting the text essentially allows us to take that output, which would be this entire reply, and we're going to split it and with a separator of new line. So essentially now we can grab specific data points that are within that one big block of outputs. And for the segment index, we're going to say all as separate fields, and this will make sense. So as you see, one data block here, and there we go. Now we got 4 different data blocks, each one associated with what we care about. We got the square feet property, got the phone, got the address, and we got the one sentence summarization. From here, let's go ahead and set up our conditional statement that essentially tells us which flow we want to go down. So that's going to be our filter block. This is why understanding that toolbox is so fundamental when building out any type of automation, because this is, you know, this essentially allows you to basically proctor it and really control how you want the automation to behave. So from here, it's going to be very simple. This is going to be essentially, we're going to take the output here, and this might be, say what contains, I may need to have this so this is structured out where it's just the number. Let me see. Okay, it looks like I probably should be incentivized to do that. So what I'm gonna do though is, instead of going maybe the easier way, which would be doing ChatGPT, we're gonna do another formatter block here. And essentially the purpose of this formatter block is because we set up that memory key earlier, we know that every single time it does an output, it's going to structure the output. If I can go to the test real quick. It's going to structure the output with this specific dictation, square feet property. So what we can do here is we can set up an event of text again. We're going to continue again, and we're going to go ahead and do replace. And with replace, essentially we're going to grab the formatted output, which is going to be output 1, and we're going to say find that specific wordage, and we're going to replace it with nothing. So therefore, we are just left with the number. There we go. Now, when we do this, we can go ahead and grab the number, and we're going to say, based off this number, if it is, actually what I realized is we don't want to do a filter. We want to do another block that is basically multiple filters that allows you to do different flows. And that multiple filter block is going to be paths. So as the word kind of says, essentially paths allow us to go down different routes depending on the data of the previous route and how you structure it. So for path A, let's just say we are doing, less than 1,000 SQ, and then for path B, we'll say more than 1,000 SQ. So essentially, if you're familiar with code, like I said earlier, this is if else's. So if it is less than 1,000, we'll go down this path. If it is more than 1,000, we'll go down that path. So in our specific context here, we know that it's going to be more than 1,000, or actually quite literally 1,000. So maybe I should rename this to like equals to, or is more than 1,000. And then essentially from here, we can set up our path rule. So we'll do the exact same thing. This is just multiple filter blocks. So we'll do the exact same thing. We'll do the output of 1,000, and we'll say is greater than. So we're gonna go to our number here, greater than, and then just so you know we don't run into any issues here, we're gonna say 999, and essentially any number that is greater than 999, I sound German there, is going to be going down this path. As you see here, we got a green check mark, and we kind of proceed from here. So we are getting closer to our end solution here. So I'm gonna throw in a Google Drive here just because I want to show you something cool. And I'm gonna also throw in a Gmail block here, because what is the end conversion, or what is the end event we want to do? Let's just say we want to set up a draft email here, and we're gonna go ahead and say Google Drive here, and we're gonna say maybe typically when an individual reaches out to our company, we provide a lead file or some type of PDF. We're gonna say choose your account here. We're gonna do courses, and I'm gonna hit continue here, and then essentially we're gonna be finding the file's name. And majority of the time, your file or your underlying name of your file is gonna be fixed text, right? So we're gonna go ahead and just attach this. This was from a different tutorial. This is an Apple's Inc.'s 2019 quarterly report. Really random, I know. But the file's name is Apple Inc. And then essentially, it's always nice to add a folder here. So for us, this is our courses account. So we got a folder that is for the purpose of API access. Let me go jump in there. So we got API access. And what I mean by that is that if we come over to our drive here, and essentially I click this down here and I hit share, this drive can be accessed by anyone with the link, and this allows us to access it with the API. So, which is great. So we're gonna hit continue here. We're gonna test this step, and it should show up here. As you see here, we got that specific file here. A lot of information, don't worry about it. We're gonna come over here and we're gonna say create draft or create draft reply. We'll just say create draft for now. We'll continue here, and essentially we are gonna start grabbing data from what was said previously. So let's just say our subject line, we in theory could set up a GBT block for this, but let's just say our subject line is going to be, new lead is here. And then we're gonna go to and essentially this is gonna be the from email. So from email was this one, our main account. And then if I come down here, we can change our from name and so on and so forth. For now though, because we're setting it up as a draft, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the text that is the one sentence summarization, so I can kind of give more context before I respond to that email. And I know that maybe it's going down path, the path of greater than 1,000 square feet. So I could even add this here. So it's 1,000, more context for me to look at. And from here, essentially, we can add a signature and stuff of this nature. We can add an attachment like I previously was stating here. So we do file exists but not shown. The reason it exists but it doesn't show is because for some reason, when Zapier provides data like that, they don't like showing the actual underlying link or the information about it. Don't ask me. There's ways to use code to output it, and we've shown that in other tutorials. But from here, I got to continue, and I could go ahead and test this step, and we should get a draft email here. And there we go. We got our draft email here with the one sentence summarization, the attached PDF. In this context, could be a lead PDF, the underlying subject line. I mean, there's more information I could add here. I could have made it automatic with a template, stuff of this nature. One thing I want to point out though is in order to use Gmail, you're going to need a workspace account, which is going to be around $6 a month. That gives you access to the ability to mess around with this API and do stuff like this. But without further ado, now you've kind of understand intuitively what it takes to build out an automation flow in this context. So we know first, we have a toolbox. We need to understand everything in that toolbox so we know what our capabilities even are. If you approach an automation and you only know 2 of the apps out of that toolbox, you basically are trying to do an automation with your hands tied behind your back, because if you look behind me, we have 1, 2, 3 out of like the 5, 6 blocks. So basically 50% of this automation was Zapier apps. That's huge. And a lot of times when you're dealing with creating automations, 50 to 40% of your automation is going to be Zapier apps. So that's stage 1. Understand the toolbox, understand how to use the toolbox. Stage 2 to building out any automation is essentially understanding the software incorporated in that automation. And that just comes from experience of doing it manually. You do the audit, you do the work manually, you understand, okay, this gets called, this gets called, this gets called, this gets called. Okay, what's the next step past that? The next step past that is understanding your trigger. Your trigger in that context may be 20%, 30%, 40%, whatever. So some automations you might be able to do completely automated, but some automations you might want to have more discretion, where essentially you put in that manual labor up to 20%, and then the rest of the 80% gets triggered and essentially let the automation do the rest of the work. Whatever that may be is dependent on your business context. And then finally, just building it out. And as I said before, the best way to really look at it is if you've done it manually or do it manually, just take into account what is incurring through that process. And one great example of that was that one sentence summarization. That's something that happens subconsciously that you might not even realize you're doing, but you can have AI do it now. You know, when you read an email and you get some type of like positive or negative feeling about it, AI can do that now. So this is pretty cool stuff here. I wanted to show this real quick because I think there's a lot of niche. You can check out the playlist at the end of this video. Make sure to leave a like if you found value in this video. Playlist at the end of this video is going to be the 5,000 apps one I was talking about in this video. I wanted to show this though because a lot of tutorials are very niche down and very specific, and it doesn't kind of give you a comprehensive like idea of the general idea behind an automation. So now you have that idea, you should be better suited to build out any automation you want. But without further ado, I'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for tuning in. And yes, surprise, I'm an AI avatar. Make sure to explore more here at Corbin AI, where we demystify AI for your personal and business life. Until next time.